One of the sneaky most difficult parts of the fantasy football draft season is blending your macro level team takes, offenses you like, offenses you don't like, offenses you're neutral on, with your micro level player takes and how they are valued at ADP and what their talent looks like relative to ADP and how you like to structure your teams and all that kind of stuff. And a lot of the times, those things are at odds. I have some teams I'm really high on their offense, or at least interested in their offense, but maybe not so comfortable with the players' ADPs. And then we also have the opposite side where there's some players who I like at their cost, but they're not on my favorite offenses. They might be on some really bad offenses. So how do we balance some of those things in our drafts? That's what we're going to try to do today. Talk a couple of polarizing, tricky teams and tricky player ADPs. And of course, we're going to draft a BBM today, and we're going to hop over to DraftKings and polish it up. Let's do it. Good morning. Good morning. We're back on regular schedule. Apologies again for yesterday's scheduling snafu. We are back 11 a.m. Eastern, 10 a.m. Central local time. It is swelteringly hot already. It's going to get up to like the upper 90s here today. So I'm happy to be down in the basement talking best ball with you guys. And as I said, we're going to talk a little bit about some teams that, quite frankly, I'm sort of struggling with, but in weird, different ways. I think the royal we, myself, everyone, we talk most of the time all off season about like, I like this player at this price, or I don't like this player, or this guy seems fine, but I like someone else better, or I, get to that range and I usually need a running back, or that's the quarterback window. So I struggle, there's all these competing factors, but one of them that I have found to be sort of not a blind spot, but maybe is that I have offenses that I really like, but I struggle. We want to stack and we want to correlate and we want to benefit from offenses that are good and benefit from not having offenses that are bad. But how do you balance it with the individual player ADPs is I would assume something that everyone struggles with. Maybe it's just me, but I've been finding it a lot in my drafts. And as I dig into, we're into June, we're getting a little bit more meat on the bone with our portfolio. You can look at the teams that you've drafted now, which I do using our Draft IQ tool every single day, looking at the different stacks I've paired together, obviously my player exposures, the combinatorial stuff. What are my opponents doing? I'm digging into that using Draft IQ pretty much every single day. And something that like I said, most of the subjects that I talk about are like, I'm having a difficult time with this, or this is interesting to me, or oh, this happened in my draft. And it actually all started with, I got a couple of teams. This is not an exhaustive list. They're just some examples. I imagine you have some teams maybe or some players that you're struggling with and vice versa. I want to do a couple of teams that are offenses that I'm high on, maybe exceptionally so, in terms of like, I really would like to have like stacks of that offense or pieces of that offense. Like I often do if you show up to week 17, how excited would you be to have that player or that stack or whatever on your team? And I have some teams that I think I would be pretty happy about showing up to week 17, or at least showing up, to week 15 or 16 or something like that. I might be really high on them scoring a bunch of points over the whole season, but maybe I don't know who to pick. Maybe I don't feel comfortable with certain individual player ADPs. And then the flip side, a couple of teams who I'm not that high on. Like from an offensive perspective, I'm not super high on a couple of offenses, but I do quite like some individual player ADPs. We're going to get into a couple of those. Then we're going to pop into a BBM. We're going to pop into DraftKings. If you've not signed up yet, before we get started, before Spike Week Premium, hit the thumbs up on this button, subscribe to the channel. That's all it costs for this show is a quick click of the thumbs up. It's totally free other than that. And if you want to use the tools like you'll see here today, if you want to use the rankings that we have for all sports, college football is coming soon, and we'll have college football best ball rankings. Second half, I'm going to put together some baseball contests for the second half contest, baseball rankings for the second half contest. We got it all covered. You can join the Discord as well as part of Spike Week Premium. There's a link in the description below. Super quick, Matt says, yeah, back to your regularly scheduled. Good morning. Good morning. A good question from Goober. I'll hit the remind me of that question in a few minutes when we get done with some of these offenses. It's a very good question. Shout out Genty. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Much appreciated. Amen with this humidity, dude. Jesus, I'm walking the dogs at like 7 a.m, full sweat, completely drenched in sweat. It's outrageous. And good morning, good morning. Welcome everyone. Happy to be back on regular schedule. So the team that sort of sparked this for me, that I would say I'm having the most difficult time with in drafts, and it's not because I dislike the offense. I actually am pretty bullish on this offense. I think it's kind of exciting, everything that the Denver Broncos have put together. In general, you have somewhat blossoming, say whatever we want about Bo Nix, but certainly not a bad NFL quarterback. Exactly how good is he or will he become remains to be seen. If he's closer to the bottom or in the middle or whatever, I don't think he's going to be Patrick Mahomes or anything. But he's a quarterback of a team that is pretty successful and has had some really monster spike weeks already in his career, including last season, including against the Bengals in Week 17 a couple of years ago. Bo Nix is fine. Like, if the Vikings had Bo Nix, we'd be really even more excited for Justin Jefferson and Jordan Addison and stuff like that. So he clears the bar of competence level at the quarterback position. Sean Payton is a coach that, again, say whatever we want about him, is one we've been trusting to produce at least some semblance of quality offense. When he got hired by the Broncos, we were excited. All they've done is score points and be really successful on the football field. A lot of that has to do with the defense, of course. But I don't think they have a single player, sans maybe J.K. Dobbins, who I do like quite a bit, that stands out at cost for me. And so I'm having a very difficult time figuring out what to do with the Denver Broncos. I've been sort of just forcing in the stacks. Let me put Denver in here. I think my keyboard just died now. So if I go and search for Denver, I've drafted 52. I drafted a couple more. I think I'm at 54 BBMs, but nonetheless. And you see, I have a bunch of J.K. Dobbins. Of course, in Best Ball Mania, it's going to be a little bit skewed because I draft 0 running back teams in BBM specifically. However, 2% Jalen Waddle. I'm just like taking my daily vitamin on Cortland Sutton and dealing with the 8%. RJ Harvey, I'm like, I guess, sure, every once in a while, I just like force the click. Like I said, I do like J.K. Dobbins, and I've been, as I said, forcing a little bit of Bo Nix. I like Pat Bryant as a super late wide receiver. I don't particularly love the Jonah Coleman price. And so you see, if I don't make any form of adjustment, I'm going to head into the season, generally speaking, outside of J.K. Dobbins, like underweight on the Denver Broncos. But they're a pretty high pass rate team. Last year, from an EPA per play perspective, they were okay on offense, slightly average to above average, but specifically, they were quite good on the passing side. You see here, if you're watching on if you're watching on YouTube, from an EPA per play perspective through the passing game, they were a top 10 passing offense. They were actually a bad rushing offense, relatively speaking, below average rushing offense. From a pass rate perspective, they were, up there. They're not quite the Chiefs or the Cardinals, but they were up there in terms of their pass rate over expected. They're one of the higher pass rate teams in the NFL. And so there's this balancing act of like that's checking a lot of boxes. Good passing offense, high pass rate, quality quarterback play. Jalen Waddle, Cortland Sutton, Pat Bryant, Troy Franklin, Evan Ingram, Harvey, Dobbins, Coleman. There's a lot of pieces that are would create a solid offense and a solid fantasy scoring environment, despite the defense, of course. But they're still going to throw, even if the defense is well. We just saw that in this exact same ecosystem last season. But I struggle with what I have Waddle a little bit behind ADP. I have Sutton a little bit behind ADP. I have Harvey a little bit behind ADP. I do have Dobbins ahead. I have Nix, right, close enough in line, a little bit ahead. I have Coleman behind ADP. And so that's one of those weird ones where I'm trying to make sure to give myself sort of reminders about the Denver Broncos that I need to make sure that I am drafting them, forcing them into my teams. Next up is another team that I like even more than the Denver Broncos. If you got to the end of the season and the San Francisco 49ers were the highest scoring offense in football, would anyone like really be shocked? We all trust Kyle Shanahan. Brock Purdy is good. Christian McCaffrey, for his new warts as a pretty poor rushing from an efficiency perspective, he's not a particularly special rushing talent anymore. He's a phenomenal receiver out of the backfield, the best in football, essentially. Him and Gibbs and Bijan, whatever. Obviously, I'm not taking him on underdog, and I'm taking a sort of a big stand against Christian McCaffrey, relatively speaking. But I've recently bumped these numbers up like a ton. I found, you see on your screen, 13% Mike Evans, 25% Brock Purdy, 10% Ricky Pearsall, 15% George Kittle, 4% Dejon Stribling, 10% Jordan James, and 4% Brandon Ayuk, who shows up, and he is, of course, not a San Francisco 49er. Let's not get into the Brandon Ayuk thing. We can save that for a different day. And a sprinkle one Christian Kirk team in Best Ball Mania is what I have, again, through 52 teams. But these numbers, as I mentioned with the Broncos, the 49ers were another one where I was just like, I've been hammering Brock Purdy of late and like just sort of figuring it out. I didn't like Kittle to start the season. I think I'm going to move him up in the rankings, as a matter of fact. Pearsall, like a smidge behind ADP, right? Mike Evans, like a smidge behind ADP on those guys, and behind on Christian McCaffrey. I'm not as big of a Stribling guy. I think he's totally fine. I probably want to get that number up as well. My Stribling exposure. But again, they are maybe the epitome of, dude, this offense is going to be good. It's always good. Like injuries, Kittle goes down and Pearsall goes down, and there's no more Debo, there's no more Ayuk, and they're still out there scoring a bunch of points. Brock Purdy is winning Sam Sherman millions of dollars, putting up nuclear weeks in the fantasy playoffs, in particular this year in week 17, but I believe he did it in week 16 as well, with like back-to-back 40 balls or whatever. That now he was hurt for part of the season, but in the playoffs he came through because he's a good quarterback with some rushing upside, and he is the point guard of one of the best offenses in football. And so I was finding myself, because I don't take a ton of Mike Evans and I don't take much, if any, Christian McCaffrey, no other stacking players for Brock Purdy go ahead of him. So if you don't have if you don't have Christian McCaffrey and you don't have Mike Evans, this is another issue that I run into, like from comparing the player ADP to getting exposure to the offense. And I'd be like, well, I was just passing on Brock Purdy. I'm like, I use the draft hacker, so correlations are lighting up on my screen and all that different kind of stuff. And I'm choosing other quarterbacks. Mahomes. I really like Mahomes. I really like Justin Herbert, Dak Prescott, or Jared Goff. I might have Gibbs or Amon-Ra or Jamison Williams or even Laporta. There's all the Lions go ahead of Jared Goff. So you can fall into this trap that you end up not taking really good quarterback picks, and then in turn not stacking this offense just because I don't love Mike Evans, but maybe I really like Brock Purdy. I think he's a really good click. And yet I was finding myself not having him. So I did what Goober says here. Purdy as a guy just need to get comfortable taking unstacked. I just started taking him. I took a little bit more Mike Evans in that tier that he goes in, late fourth round, to just make it happen. And then I also started taking Purdy unstacked, targeting Pearsall, targeting Kittle. And if I don't get one of those guys, Stribling is available. Christian Kirk is technically available as an absolute backdoor last round click if you really need him. So I've been attacking the 49ers because I found this sort of like I opened my portfolio and there's like hardly any San Francisco exposure. That seems really, really, really stupid. And these prices are not prohibitive. It's not. It's a different thing, which we'll get to this offense in just a second. It's not like the Atlanta Falcons, as an example, who I have sort of the complete and utter opposite take. If you watch the top stacks video that Karain and I did, we both agreed we have the Atlanta Falcons as our last 32nd ranked stack for best ball this season. And yet I think, like, again, I'm drafting Bijan on DraftKings and drafters and stuff. And I really like Drake London. I think Kyle Pitts' price is like okay. Outside of that, I think it's pretty terrible. But I like, who doesn't like Bijan Robinson? Who doesn't like Drake London? Kyle Pitts is fine, around pick 100 or so, pick 110 at the tight end position. And so I would find myself getting like more or as much Atlanta Falcons exposure as I was getting San Francisco 49ers exposure. And the 49ers are probably going to be one of my higher ranked stacks when Pat and I finish up that show tomorrow. And the Falcons are dead last. But my portfolio, if you didn't look at it from the macro perspective, because I'm like, yeah, Drake London looks good in the second round. Whereas Mike Evans, I'm like, whatever, he's fine. And so you end up having more exposure to an offense you don't even really like. And you actually, like, I'm genuinely terrified of how this thing goes for the Falcons. The quarterback play is definitely not going to be good. How bad? We'll see. Does Tua have a bounce back in him? Does Penix come back and show something in the second half? We'll see. But the overall collection of talent outside of Bijan and London is not very good. Kyle Pitts is fine, right? Kyle Pitts, whatever. Don't have a really strong take about Kyle Pitts as a talent. He is a professional NFL sort of tight end. But Bijan and London are really good. Outside of that, when chaos prevails, as it always tends to do, what happens? They really strike me as like a house of cards. Caleb McGarry retired fairly recently. The offensive line is going to be in the bottom half for sure. So you have a poor offensive line. Jahan Dotson and Zachariah Branch as the ancillary weapons. If something happens to Drake London or Bijan Robinson, or even a little bit of Kyle Pitts, like, there's just not enough talent, and the quarterback play is not good enough. We saw what happens to Tua when things crumble down around him. We've seen Michael Penix in this situation before, and Kirk Cousins outperformed him. We feel okay about Kirk Cousins now because he stepped in for Michael Penix and was better. And so I found myself, again, you see 21% Drake London. I've been making sure that I don't get out over my skis on Drake London, despite some of my structural takes, despite my strong opinion of Drake London as a football player, and the fact that he is, going to get 1 billion targets. That's why he goes in the second round. I want to make sure in these situations, it doesn't mean don't take Drake London. It definitely doesn't mean don't take Bijan Robinson. It doesn't mean don't take Kyle Pitts, because bad offenses can still score fantasy points, and really good players can score fantasy points on bad offenses. There's no denying that. But it does mean, for me, how I like to approach it is I always use the phrase, right? I just don't want to get out over my skis, because if we're drafting like we're right, and we're right that, like, man, it gets sketchy for the Falcons after those top couple of guys, there's a tremendous amount of fragility to that offense. It is peak house of cards, right? The base is solid with Bijan and Kyle Pitts, but a nice little breeze blows through and that thing goes tumbling to the ground. Whereas other offenses, like our Chargers, like those 49ers that we just talked about, even like the Broncos, like, we just saw them without Jalen Waddle. When Jalen Waddle goes waddling off to the sideline in the second quarter of week 1 and we all get annoyed, they'll be fine because they've already been fine without him. If J.K. Dobbins goes down, they were fine without J.K. Dobbins. If R.J. Harvey goes down, they got J.K. Dobbins and Jonah Coleman now to fill in the gaps. So it's not that I dislike Bijan or Drake London or will not draft them, but but with my macro take about the Falcons offense, plus the macro take about the fragility of the offense, those are situations that, especially given the cost of these guys, I just don't really want to have my season dependent upon them. I want to get my exposure, but I don't want the entire season to bank, or too much of my season to bank on an offense like this. Another one of those offenses that makes me feel, I feel even more disgusting about this, but the Cleveland Browns, now Joel Bitonio gone from the offensive line. Like, oh boy. The Browns have, if the Falcons have bad quarterback play, the Browns have probably league worst quarterback play, up there with the league worst in terms of quarterback play, with Watson, Shador, Taylon Green, Dylan Gabriel. Whatever happens there, I assume it will be Watson in week 1. But a bad offensive line, an inefficient running game, then I don't know how we can expect it to get much better. It should hopefully get better, because it can't be much worse than it was last year. And I do think Judkins and Sampson are talented, but the defense just got worse. So maybe that helps from a passing volume perspective. But similarly, like I don't like Judkins at his price. So that one's been okay. But I've been trying to make sure, again, I don't get out over my skis on Harold Fannin, who I believe in. He's not Bijan and Drake London, but I believe it in my plums that Harold Fannin is an awesome, awesome NFL football player. I believe he's one of the only 1, 2, 3, 4. There's maybe 4 potential tight ends who are like the most target dominant players in their own passing game. I think we've only seen the beginning of Harold Fannin, and now David Njoku is gone from there. He's going to get even more playing time, which is going to lead to even more targets, and we might get better game scripts. So he checks every box except for the team take. And so again, in those instances, as much as I have Fannin ranked well ahead of ADP, and I think he individually is an awesome click, but I don't want to ignore the Brown stuff. And but conversely, I don't want to ignore my individual player take, right? It's this balancing act where someone would come in and like, come on, the Browns are going to stink. I'm not going to draft them. I'm like, the Browns will stink. I agree with you, but Harold Fannin is so good, in my opinion, or has the potential to be so good, that it doesn't matter if they stink. So it doesn't mean anyone's wrong about any of these different opinions, but it's that balancing act. If you believe in Harold Fannin, like I believe in Harold Fannin, you obviously think pick 97 or after pick 100 is a phenomenal pick. But again, do I want, maybe a little more than 12%? Probably. Brock Bowers has been getting in the way of some of these other guys. But do I want a little bit more Harold Fannin? Probably, because I believe in the talent that much. Do I want? It's like cheap tight end version of Drake London for me. Like, I don't have a single question mark about the player. I don't have a question mark about the target share. I don't have, but I have significant concerns, significant aren't you worrieds about the Cleveland Browns, about the Atlanta Falcons, and I don't want to be going absolutely crazy. What's really difficult for the Cleveland Browns is I think they also give us some pretty good values later. I have only 2% Kevin Concepcion. Just I'm not as high on him as the prospect as I think the market is, but I'm going to just sort of take my medicine with him a little bit as well. I think I have a little bit more on some of the other sites. Similarly, I think Denzel Boston is becoming a pretty darn good click where he is going. And I think Dylan Sampson is a totally reasonable, a little bit more on PPR sites, but a totally reasonable late, both like somewhat of a floor because he's going to play. He's probably going to catch some real passes in this offense. And I think he has some talent, bounce back upside. And then he, of course, has contingent value if something were to happen to Quinshon Judkins. And so there's like individually, and maybe you like Judkins more than me. I would listen to someone who really likes Quinshon Judkins. So these are like talented players. Quinshon Judkins, Harold Fannin, Casey Concepcion, Denzel Boston, Dylan Sampson. That's like a functional group of exciting young talents on an offense. But there's just like almost, unless some of these guys are stars, and I think Fannin could be, but like maybe Concepcion or Boston become like stars, that's the path to them being much better on offense. And even then, the offensive line might hold them back. Quarterback play, of course, is probably going to hold them back. So I don't want, again, my sort of season dependent upon these guys, even though I think if we just do like, who's your favorite clicks and like in this range and how do you have this guy ranked relative to ADP, they all look fine to good. But I want to balance these two things, right? That's the overwhelming continual message here. One last team that is I don't know. I'm having a very difficult time with the New York Giants. They're probably like the Browns is a little bit easier to poke holes in because it's really easy to see that they're just like, it's going to be bad, right? Like it's going to be bad on offense. It would be utterly shocking if they were average. It's unlikely that any individual team is ever the worst offense because there's 32 teams and bad things happen. You know, quarterbacks get hurt, right? The Jets were playing Brady Cook by the end of the year last year. You know, if Aaron Rodgers gets hurt for the Steelers offense is going to be very bad. We can't foresee some of these things. So it's unlikely that any individual offense is that bad, but it would be pretty shocking if the Cleveland Browns were, and frankly, the Atlanta Falcons were above average, right? Which is like what you really want for a big win from those teams. Whereas the Giants, given the collection of talent, Malik Neighbors, if healthy, is one of the best wide receivers on planet Earth. Cam Scadaboo is like a bulldozer who was playing really well before he got hurt last year. Jackson Dart showed some promise, right? He's a young second-year quarterback. We, air quotes, we are like at least mildly excited about from a talent upside perspective. We know he runs, which is nice for fantasy. But if he can continue to grow as a passer, especially if he now has Malik Neighbors to throw to, that seems pretty good. They add Isaiah Likely. That's fun. Isaiah Likely, his old coach, who now is his new coach, said he was a Pro Bowler and then didn't use him very much. Very bizarre situation with Harbaugh. But I think we all agree Isaiah Likely is certainly in the top half of NFL tight end talents. So that's fun. Getting a guy like that and, you know, at pick 130 seems good. Tyrone Tracy is a bit of a handcuff, but he showed competence in 2 seasons on not that great of offenses. There's a lot of reasons for optimism, individual pieces with all of these guys, right? Say whatever, like even tossing Neighbors aside, you guys know how I'm approaching Neighbors. Just, you know, click and pray by the dip. And if everyone is wrong that this superstar talent won't be healthy and won't be ready to go this year, it's a huge win. But I have some very real concerns about the New York Giants, and I am in the midst of getting out over my skis. Obviously on Malik Neighbors. Cam Scadaboo is a guy who I've been forcing myself I struggle not taking Neighbors in the 3rd or 4th round. Cam Scadaboo in the 4th or 5th is I think an awesome click who I have been trying to make sure I take some of the other backs in that range. Of course, I take receivers. Mike Evans, sort of, how do you get your Mike Evans exposure? Maybe you don't take Cam Scadaboo, because I don't think similarly as strongly as I feel about Neighbors, Scat, Dart, Likely, whatever, as strongly as I feel about the individual pieces and even sort of the collection, there are a lot of concerns. Like I'm not sold that Jackson Dart is, you know, this quarterback we really want to be putting all our chips in on from a real life perspective. He runs for fantasy and that's great. I'm not sure we've seen enough as a passer. I'm not sure that Matt Nagy and Harbaugh is a winning recipe, right? People bring that up all the time. It's a valid concern. Matt Nagy is like a kiss of death everywhere he goes for the offense. It goes south, whether that's his doing or some bad luck or a little bit of both. It's a risk. It's certainly not an opportunity for doing opportunities and risks. It's terrifying. I think Harbaugh is a little bit boomerish. I think he's a competent head coach as a CEO, but I'm not entirely sure he's going to solve any problems that the Giants might have. And then, you know, the secondary weapons are poor. I don't think Malachi Fields is a good prospect. Darnell Mooney has been good for 1.5 to 2 years out of his career. He pops up for a good season every so often and then turns back into a pumpkin and is absolutely horrible. They signed all these bums, right? Darius Slayton is back. and they signed Juju and Odell and Braxton Berrios, and it's pretty gross. And so if Neighbors is not right, if Scadaboo is not right, if Matt Nagy, like, speaking of house of cards, there's internal turmoil with the New York Giants, which doesn't exactly give you the warm and fuzzies. It doesn't really matter, but it's not ideal. There's a lot of reasons for concern with the New York Giants, even though I have a lot of excitement around these individual pieces, and they are the one I'm struggling with the most in not getting out over my skis on these guys. Let's pop into a BBM and see if we can't rectify some of these issues that we got going on here. All right, let's see. Yeah, sorry. Don't forget Calvin Austin. Easily forgettable Calvin Austin. A very forgettable field stretcher. I think Calvin Austin is like kind of a fun individual piece to have on an NFL offense, but I don't think he's moving the needle for an NFL offense. I think we might have seen him move the needle in years past on teams that really needed some wide receiver help. He did not help. Let's see. Is this you, Dane? You've been asking this like in at multiple shows. I don't know. Yeah, my keyboard just died. Let's see. Who had the most 20+ rushes? Oops. Oh, God. Yes, I have an ad blocker. Let's see. Leaders. Player stats, rushing. They don't have 20+, but what... let's see. Advanced? Is it under advanced? No. It's not even something I ever look at. I'm going to guess Derrick Henry. Derrick Henry, maybe. Let's see. Sorry, I'm trying to catch up on the chat. We just need 4 for a BBM, if anybody. I'm feeling this. Sweetleaf says 2-week timeout from DraftKings Millie drafting. He got out over his skis on Millies. I think I did a little bit too. I'm with you. Okay. Thank you, Goobs. As Jonathan Brooks's price rises, but Chuba stays the same, does that make Chuba a better value, or does his value stay the same? I think his value stays the same. I think the individual player value is generally independent of one another. Not always. Nothing is ever concrete or binary in that regard. But Jonathan Brooks could have been underpriced before and Chuba not be overpriced. It doesn't work like that. Like, this NFL seasons play out in a myriad of different ways. Jonathan Brooks can end up being a winner and Chuba was a fine pick. Like, Ramondre last year wasn't overpriced just because Travion came on and dominated the middle of the season. Obviously, Ramondre was useful all year and turned it on at the end. But most of how I view it is I believe that individual player pieces are priced for their individual, all their range of outcomes and the expectations around that individual player. If the expectations with Jonathan Brooks is rising because we feel more comfortable now that he's healthy. We feel much more solid that, like, he's probably going to play a role. And if something happens to Chuba, he's next man up. So he's rising because we're getting more excited and getting more confirmation about what he is as a pick. But I actually don't really think that changes anything about what Chuba is as a pick. And I think the market is agreeing with that, in that Chuba is never going to be, a second round pick in fantasy or something like that. But he is a highly paid lead back on a reasonable offense that has scored a bunch of fantasy points in the past when given volume. And Jonathan Brooks has never really played in the NFL and has basically not played football in 3 seasons. And so it would be wildly unrealistic to assume Jonathan Brooks just steps in anytime soon and takes, and is getting 25 touches in an NFL football game. I mean, unrealistic. It's also would be wildly irresponsible of the Carolina Panthers to take this guy who has essentially not played football and not been able to stay healthy for years and years and years. When they drafted him, he had a torn ACL, and now he's done it again. They're hoping for the future. Of course, they want to win right now, but they're hoping for the future for Jonathan Brooks. That's why they drafted him. They think he's probably the back of the future. They need to get him through this season healthy. Now, if something happens to Chuba and that additional volume comes, it's definitely it's possible. Sometimes you get forced into things you don't want to do, and maybe he's ready for it at some point this season. So that's why he's a good pick. But I don't think anything about Jonathan Brooks looking better, it changes the Chuba Hubbard bet in any real regard. I'm also surprised because the market does tend to do that. Like if they fall in love with a certain player, they end up hating the player who it possibly competes with. But they're different. But like the bet for Chuba is he's the starting running back on the Carolina Panthers, kind of chaperone, right? Gives you some usable weeks, hopefully a couple of spikes here or there. And maybe, later in the season, he is losing work to Jonathan Brooks. But how did you get to Jonathan Brooks, or how did you get to someone like Jonathan Brooks in that, think back to, I can't believe I'm getting, speaking of getting out over my skis on some of the boomer references from a best ball perspective, but like, how did you get to Rashad Penny? 5 years ago, literally, you needed Rashad, or maybe 4. Either way, you needed Rashad Penny to win best ball tournaments. He crushed every week of the playoffs. He crushed week 17. He was the running back 1 in fantasy during the fantasy playoffs. But he basically scored 0 points the rest of the year because he was hurt. How do you get to that guy? It's like that's Chuba Hubbard's real practical use. And then we always assume it's like, well, the young guy's of course going to be the one that surges later. It's like, well, Jonathan Brooks could get hurt again. Chuba could just get more volume. Like, there's variance and there's chaos that also favors, right? Like the chaos did not favor Travion Henderson peaking at the end of the year. The chaos actually favored Ramondre Stevenson peaking at the end of the year. So I think sometimes similarly, oh God. Of course. Let's do. Here's another offense. Here's the flip side of what I was talking about. I don't have that much Nico Collins, and it has nothing to do with Nico Collins, but I don't think I'm treating Nico fairly enough, right? Like I have 16% AJ Brown, who I'm not concerned about that, but I have 18% Drake London, 21% Drake London, and I only had 4% Nico Collins heading into this particular draft, and I think that was me being unfair because I'm concerned about the Texans. That's the Nico Collins problem. But it has nothing to do with Nico Collins. And I'm setting aside my Falcons concerns to still draft Drake London. So I want to make sure it's another good way to make sure I'm not getting too much of Drake London is I should alternately be taking Nico Collins as well. I do not have George Pickens with either Puka or Nico. I have my 9% George Pickens, but let's do Pickens here. Exactly. Oatmeal Collins. I like it. Cojones are definitely on the table, especially in Best Ball Mania with Malik Neighbors. It's a little bit, I mean, I'm drafting a ton of Malik Neighbors everywhere, but it's a little bit more Best Ball Mania specific where, like I said, I'm drafting 0 running back teams. I'm drafting plenty of running backs on other sites or in other formats. Like once I get to like the eliminator and stuff on Underdog, I haven't started drafting it yet. I'm of course going to draft early running backs on things like the eliminator. It's a Best Ball Mania specific strategy, so naturally I'm going to get. I'm taking $3,750 across 150 teams and saying, if the Rashee Rice, Malik Neighbors, types and the early superstar wide receivers, Justin Jefferson, Brock Bowers, if those guys fail, well, I'm just not winning this tournament. I have other teams. where we're going to have lots of other guys. I'm overweight Jahmyr Gibbs on DraftKings as an example, which is a little bit of luck, but I'm overweight Jahmyr Gibbs on DraftKings. I'm going to be massively overweight Ashton Genty in my portfolio, despite the fact that I'm taking 150 teams into Best Ball Mania without him. So, not every you don't like. There's no rule, and in fact, I don't think you should draft the exact same way in every single tournament and every single format and every single site. You should try to find angles to each like different tournament and different site, because you're drafting in different environments with different payout structures and different field sizes and different, right? We always talk about what do you win when you win. Like there's much different. What do you win when you win in Best Ball Mania? And what are your odds of winning? They're so low. I'm taking this huge home run swing. The most likely outcome is that I'm Joey Gallo and I swing and miss. But if it happens to connect that 1 out of 20 times or whatever that I happen to connect, that Joey Gallo actually makes contact, it goes a long way. And I get a chance with a high upside team in week 17. Do we think maxing 0 wide receiver on DraftKings and robust running back on Underdog is a good way to hedge? I think it's totally fine. I think it's totally fine. I think on DraftKings you can have your cake and eat it too with some wide receivers. Like you can still get robustian teams or like a hero wide receiver team, like take Jamar Chase and then hit some running backs. You can have it both ways. I think on DraftKings, on Underdog, it's just a little bit different in my opinion. Oh, look at there. We're going to take Mike Evans because, as we said, we need to get access to this 49ers offense. Definitely a different start for me. Can you check if you drafted any duped teams? You can check because in Draft IQ you can go in and go to the lineups page, right? So it has every team you drafted is in the lineups page. I don't know what the easiest way to do it. Maybe go to your player combinations or whatever, but I don't see mathematically you're so wildly unlikely to have a duplicated team just because you only get, right? Like I've drafted 50 teams, so 2% is one share. So if I have 10% of the guy, I have five shares of the player. It's unlikely I even have one individual player on all of those 5 teams. Nonetheless, 17 of the same players 2 different times on those teams. So, oh my God, we just autoed Loveland, but actually I would have taken Loveland anyway. So there we go. Got excited to talk about team dupes. People with the sidekick are drafting dupe teams. Yeah, that is a risk. It's a risk in using automated tools that don't know your portfolio because it's going to recommend the same things, right? The sidekick is wonderful. They built an awesome tool, but if you're giving pick recommendations that don't factor in your portfolio, it's a risk. 3 wide receivers and 0 running backs. Welcome back. Up to 4 wide receivers and a tight end and no running backs. Oh my God. I wrote every team down in a notebook as I drafted them. 635. That is wonderful. I love that. I love that so much. Jonathan Brooks is a bet on talent. If he comes back to full health, he's just better than Chuba. He was elite in college. So he was really good in college. I would not go so far as to say elite. He really only had 1 season. Dang it, I keep forgetting that that's college basketball. Let's go look at Jonathan Brooks super quickly. I always forget if he's Jonathan Brooks. Whoops. Yeah, okay. So he really only had 1 season prior to his big breakout, which was when he entered the NFL. And he was awesome. 187 carries, 1,100 yards, 10 touchdowns, 25 catches, 286 yards. He was efficient. He was a good receiver. He was really, really good. He's not like when I think elite. So this is just different definitions of different words or different definitions, having different definitions of these phrases is he was really, really good. but this is not Bijan. This is not Jonathan Taylor. This is not Saquon. This is not Ashton Genty. Because like, let's look at why is dang. Okay. Now tell me which running back prospect was better in college. That guy that we just showed, or Chuba. I'm about to be back on the clock, and we'll go look at Chuba at the same age, right? So as a freshman at Oklahoma State, he was pretty awesome. 6 yards per carry as a committee back, 700 yards, about 1,000 total yards. Let's do Jaylen Warren. And then finish the Chuba point. As a sophomore in the Big 12, Chuba led the nation in rushing. He led the nation in rushing touchdowns. He led the nation in like workload. He had 21 total touchdowns. He caught more passes in his career by a significant amount than Jonathan Brooks did. If he had come out after his sophomore season, he went back to school. If he had come out after and then he got banged up and Oklahoma State's offense went in the shitter. He would have gone earlier. That's not, I'm not trying to like stand for that. Chuba is he's not some awesome. We'll take Caleb. Hold on. 33%. 33% of my Loveland teams have Caleb. Let's do Dak instead. I need some Dak Pickens stacks in my life. Yeah, I mean, why we think Jonathan Brooks is better because he went in the second round, but I think he has more talent upside. I think we know that Chuba Hubbard is just a whatever NFL running back. I think sometimes he gets unfairly he's a little bit better than people think, but he's not average. He's whatever. He's your but Rico Dowdle was alongside him, and like Chuba 2 years ago, everybody's like, oh, look, Dowdle just dunking on Chuba. It's like, well, Chuba got banged up, and then Dowdle had a couple of really good games, but Chuba did that 2 years ago in the same offense. You know, the ebbs and flows of running back production are so all over the place. Like, we're drafting Amari Hampton in the second round. There was some Amari Hampton conversation this morning in the Spike Week Discord. And we're drafting Amari Hampton in the second round. And he was fucking awful last year. I'm drafting Ashton Genty at the end of the first round. Right? He was terrible last year. 2 years ago, before the 2024 season, the assumption was like Chuba was terrible. Like, look at his success rate, look at all this kind of stuff. And then he nuked for fantasy. He was one of the best picks on the entire board. And then last year, he was not so good and got banged up, and Rico sort of took the job for a little while. And then Chuba got it back at the end of the season. Jonathan Brooks could absolutely take the job from him. But I don't think it's realistic to expect him just to steal it like week one and get all this work. Before his elite season, he was behind Bijan, though, so it kind of felt like Priest Holmes or something. Yeah, but that's also a cautionary tale, because that's what people have been saying about Roschon Johnson, or had been saying about Roschon Johnson. Yeah, for sure. Eric says, if I were a Panthers fan, I like Jonathan Brooks. I'm not trying to make this about like disliking Jonathan Brooks. I have 21% Jonathan Brooks. I like Jonathan Brooks. I'm drafting Jonathan Brooks. I'm just also drafting some Chuba Hubbard. I think that they're both totally fine picks. And if I were a Panthers fan, hell yeah, I'd be excited about Brooks. Okay, this is interesting that all these quarterbacks are still available here. Okay, there goes Mahomes. I'm going to skip Lawrence because I just mentioned I'm trying to do Let's do Purdy. I'm pretty comfortable giving somebody a fun Lawrence team here. That's all I would say. I just we're quibbling over right. This is like saying, like, what's your definition of zero running back? Oh, you think, it's this? Well, I think it's this. It's like calling him elite, I think, is over the top, because he was like the truly elite guys. He was not that. He was really good. He was really good. I was excited for him. He was really fun at Texas. It's just like, go look at Jonathan Taylor. Like, it's crazy. Holy shit, Lawrence still here? We have made a mistake. Let's do Jonathan Brooks. How about that? Suck it. I duped everyone. Sit here and talk about Chuba Hubbard and how good he was his sophomore year at Oklahoma State, and then draft Jonathan Brooks. What if they both finish between RB20 and RB30 and don't really matter that much either way? So it's a good question. I mean, it's genuinely very possible, but I think if you get the RB20 and the RB30 in these ranges, it's like mostly fine. What I really care about for best ball, right? Those are like season-long cumulative stats, and they're not irrelevant, because it generally is directionally accurate on like how good of a pick the guy was. But in best ball, we really just like you're not seeking out the highest scoring team over the course of the whole season, unless we're on drafters, where that stuff is a little bit more applicable. But even then, what you really need is just like useful production from a lot of your players. You need to hit some wins. You need to hit some big home runs, right? But what you really need is just like a bunch of useful production from your team. And so it's more about avoiding failures and finding a couple of hits, and then navigating that playoff gauntlet. And like the guy, like, for example, Derrick Henry, again, won people all the money last year. Over the course of the whole season, Derrick Henry did not, air quotes, like, pay off his price. Travion Henderson did not pay off his price last season. But if that month that he was the RB1 in fantasy, or the RB2, I think, behind Christian McCaffrey, maybe. But that month that he went absolutely nuts, like, if that came at the right time, he would have been a league winner. You would have needed him to win. And so it's this game is weird. You're not real, like, we have to judge these guys somewhat based upon, like, the air quotes, did you pay off your price type stuff. But it's not really what matters. You just really need like reasonable production, health, and having the right guys at the right time. That's why it's difficult. If it was easy, we would all win. Let's see. I agree. Brooks is, you can, right? We've basically never seen. Brooks is a mystery box who air quotes, we are excited about his talent. It's fun to speculate on those guys. Let's do Mr. Boring Ass Aaron Jones. It disgusts me how much Aaron Jones I'm going to have this year. Off subject, how do you rank the top 4 picks in Superflex? Gibbs, Allen, Bijan, Lamar. The quarter, Allen, Lamar, Gibbs, Bijan. is how I would rank him. Yeah, that's funny. Yeah, Kyle Pitts sucked last year until he didn't, and then Kyle Pitts went for 40, and we were all like, well, just lost because of Kyle Pitts. And I never once, heading into, what was it, week 15 that he did that? Heading into week 15, if you ask somebody, are they worried about not having Kyle Pitts? They never would have said yes. So even the week that it happened, we were like, I don't care. You don't, why would I care if I have Kyle Pitts on my team or not? Never even crossed our minds. And then after the game happened, I remember sitting on Friday morning, like doing a show that did Kyle Pitts just end our fantasy season? Of course, we're getting Keaton on this team. So 11 picks. We got Dak and Purdy at quarterback, Jalen Warren, Jonathan Brooks, Aaron Jones, Keaton Mitchell at running back, Puka Nacua, Nico Collins, George Pickens, Mike Evans. Of course, both of those guys are stacked with those two quarterbacks, and Colston Loveland at tight end. I'm trying to, let's move up over here. I usually put my head in the bottom right-hand part of the screen on DraftKings, and I think Drafters, because the board gets covered up if you do it the opposite way. But it works. It doesn't work so well for Underdog. What are your current top 3 or 4 running backs you like to land on a 0 running back team? Keaton Mitchell, Bashal Tootin, Ray Davis, of course, and Aaron Jones, J.K. Dobbins. There's 5. Aaron Jones, J.K. Dobbins, the boring veteran that I need, you need in 0 running back rooms to get me some production, but I also think they have upside. Ray Davis, the late round contingent value flyer that I like to include on those teams, right? If something happens to James Cook, whether it just be for a game or for the whole season, you get outsized returns from that running back. And then Bashal Tootin, I think, is the best, mid-tier upside bet, 5th, 6th round running back. And then what was it? Oh, and then Keaton is one of my favorite running back clicks on the whole board. I think he brings a sort of blend of upside swing, weekly upside, a little bit of a floor, some uncertainty. Benefit also has contingent value if something happens to Marion Hampton. He kind of brings a little bit of each. The Dobbins and Jones really just pull from the boring projectable points. Ray just pulls from the contingent value, and Tootin pulls from he's going to play, but we're really taking a pretty big swing that he's the man with the Jags. Keaton kind of pulls from each little bucket. He's not the best in any one of those individual buckets, but he brings some characteristics of each bucket, which is really nice. I'll take Shaheed. I'm trying to get a little bit more Shaheed as well. There we go. There's a fun. Ray says Chuba's the most underrated running back in football. I love a good spicy take. When they needed to win with the Rams, they relied upon Chuba, and he's a captain of the team. Smart man. Why do I keep seeing rumors of Baker to the Steelers? I don't know, but whatever your source is on that, I would go ahead and click the unfollow, block, mute, whatever. And yes, I am going to go pull up Illinois here to get my Dak double. So 13, we got 5 more rounds to go. Puka, Nico, Pickens, Mike Evans, Loveland, Jalen Warren, Dak, Purdy, Jonathan Brooks, Aaron Jones, Keaton Mitchell, Rashid Shaheed, and Ryan Flanoy. So we'll turn this into a good old-fashioned, old-school zero running back 2-7-7-2 team. But yeah, if you're seeing Baker to the Steelers rumors, I would reconsider your news sources. Thoughts on Mike Washington? Totally fine. Last round contingent value bet. But that's all he really is a contingent value bet. We're not even super sure how good he is as a prospect, which is fine. But he's really just a CV play. So, exploring different angles, Chuba Brooks debate sort of implies one or the other will be some type of league winner. So, if that's how I'm coming off, that is not my like. Nothing is ever that. Like there's no rule that says there has to be a useful pick from every backfield and whatever. Like, first of all, they could both get hurt. We could get an Arizona Cardinals situation last year. The offense could not be good and doesn't produce anything super meaningful. There could also just be better picks. They could be fine, but other picks be better. You know, you took Chuba over Jalen Warren, and Jalen Warren is the smash. Or you took Brooks over Kenny Gainwell, or what? You know, I'm just making shit up. Brooks over Aaron Jones, and Aaron Jones ended up the better pick, or Ja'Cory Krosky Merritt, or the C-Rod FUD is not a big deal, and it's actually C-Rod. You know, there's like so many different ways. It's actually incredibly unlikely that any individual backfield has a league winner in it, even as cheap as it may be. The most likely scenario is that you get some useful weeks from someone or both, and you know, you're whatever. If they stay healthy, you're like, this is fine. That's the most likely scenario. But I just think both of them have upside to be much more than that. They both do. Thank you. Good. Are we sure Likely is better than Theo Johnson? I mean, I'm not sure about almost anything in football. That's on the higher scale of things I'm sure about, yes. I'm not positive ever. Isaiah Likely is not Brock Bowers or Trey McBride or whatever, so I can't possibly be sure, but I'm pretty confident he's better than Theo Johnson, yes. I said I need to get my strib. Yeah, I need to get my stribling up here. This is just usually Trey Harris territory for me, so it makes me uncomfortable. That's what we're trying to do. Get comfortable. So this is fair. Goose says, I don't think Keaton's role changes if Hampton gets hurt, maybe 2 to 3 extra touches, but Vidal will get the majority of the carries. This is understandable, but I think people are really anchored to this idea that Keaton cannot consume more work, and I don't think it holds up to the mom test. Keaton Mitchell was just as much of a volume hog in college as Kamani Vidal was. Mike McDaniel has turned all kinds of small backs into high volume players. Devon Achane is being drafted in the second round, and he's smaller than Keaton. He came into the league at 5'9", 185, and the knock on Devon Achane was, well, you know, in the end, he got volume in college, but in the NFL, it's just not going to happen. I'm going to take Tank Bigsby, who, of course, plays against my San Francisco 49ers in Week 17. I need a little bit more Week 17 correlation just for the screenshot equity. Keaton Mitchell was an absolutely monster volume player in college, even at his size. Mike McDaniel has done nothing but turn guys who we perceive as part-time speed backs into workhorses with major fantasy value. He pounded the table for Keaton Mitchell to be on this roster. Kamani Vidal is not a particularly strong, like outside zone type runner, which is what McDaniel's scheme will. Neither is Amari Hampton. And Raheem. So even if we set aside Achane, like, well, Achane's a unicorn or whatever. Raheem Mostert was like a 31-year-old career special teamer whose only skill that everyone agreed that he had as a running back was he's fast as shit. He was setting and resetting his own game speed record in the NFL. He was breaking the sprint speed, miles per hour that they track with next gen stats. Raheem Mostert was doing that, but we were like, yeah, but he's never going to like get the volume, even if something happens to insert other 49ers running back. And then Raheem Mostert was a workhorse, and Keaton, and Achane has been a workhorse. Mike McDaniel doesn't think in the same traditional sense in the way that John Harbaugh and Todd Monken and Arthur Smith and these type guys think, and his offensive system is structured in a different way that I have no idea how it will play, right? Like how could anyone possibly know? The Chargers don't even know exactly how this thing will play out. But I'm very confident that if we're only looking at the things Keaton has done while playing alongside Derrick Henry for the Ravens, we are missing a lot of important context about what could happen for Keaton Mitchell in a Mike McDaniel Chargers offense. Let's see. I'm not a Kamara guy either, Dorito. I'm not drafting any Alvin Kamara. Not doing it. And like, if he's the passing down back, what value? Like, so he's Samaje Perine. Like, that's ultimately what Kamara is, right? That's the better at least. Of course, we have to get. Nope. Pardon. Now I'm gonna lose out on my guy, but I need to get Freiermuth on here. We have Jaylen Warren. Get a little secondary correlation with Pat Freiermuth. Good morning, Mac. I think Hampton is Mostert and Keaton is Achane. And Vidal would become Mostert and Keaton will remain Achane. Like, if you want my gut take, truth serum, whatever the fuck you want to call it. My take is Keaton is essentially just Achane. And the Hampton, which is like totally fine. Raheem Mostert scored 21 touchdowns. Like, there's nothing wrong with being the Raheem Mostert in the offense. I think it's expected that Amari Hampton is a pretty sizable volume back, and I'm not sure that is going to be true. I'm not sure he's a great fit for this offense, and I'm not sure exactly how good Amari Hampton is. I still take him because the Chargers go Burr. He was a former first-round pick. He was a good prospect. I think a smidge overrated as a prospect, but he went in the first round, so it is what it is. But like, there's one guy who fits in this whole puzzle. Kamani Vidal is a little bowling ball, power back. And frankly, Hampton is kind of a power back. He has long speed, though. But yeah, one of the things I feel the best about is, frankly, Keaton Mitchell this year. So I know he's good. I know he has the ability to provide me upside on a weekly basis. I know that there's at least some contingent value, right? Even if it's not tremendous, that's not the point. The point, like I said, is that he's not the best CV back in the league. That's what Blake Corum. Blake Corum is the best CV back in the league. Like, okay, so he's not that. That's fine. But he's not priced like that. And B, we know what he does really well. Even if he never ends up doing anything better than that, there's still value in that. And like, chaos changes our expectations about all of these different things all the time. Fading the noise on Darnell Washington. I also I think I did click Washington once on Drafters yesterday for my first Washington click. I wouldn't say I'm fading Freiermuth is a real NFL like receiving tight end that I think has some pretty real upside. It doesn't really take away from Darnell Washington to me. I've warmed to him a little bit, but not anything super crazy. I think both are totally fine. I will have a bunch of Freiermuth and a little bit of Darnell Washington is how I would probably imagine the rest of this offseason goes. I'm gonna get Washington into a draftable range of the rankings because I do think late tight end has gotten a little bit grosser. Like I'm literally gonna add Eric All and Darnell Washington into draftable ranges. So that tells you everything you need to know about the late round tight ends. But I wouldn't say I'm like not buying the Darnell Washington thing. I just don't think it matters for Pat Freiermuth. I think Pat Freiermuth is just better at some of the stuff that like Darnell Washington is a useful real life NFL football player for sure. And he will probably score a little bit of fantasy points. But I think if there's a guy who's like, holy shit, Pat Freiermuth was like the tight end 6 on the season, to use our old methodology, and Pat Freiermuth catches 2 touchdowns in week 17 or whatever. I think he's the better bet still. Dulcich going more / a bit earlier is making the Steelers in play more. Yeah, Dulcich moved up. People are still taking Eli Stowers pretty early. Like, I mean, AJ Barner, Cade Otton, Dalton Schultz. There's some pretty bad players at the tight end position going pretty early. So, I have back down, Mike. I take too much Jordan James on. Let's see and Jordan James is on this 100% here is Puka plus Nico Collins. So I'm going to do no, I'm going to do LeQuint Allen. Just a good reminder this morning. Shout out to the Spike Week Discord. I've been taking LeQuint on the PPR sites a little bit more, not like crazy, but a little bit more. And I think, if this C-Rod stuff ends up, like LeQuint's going to make the team. I think LeQuint is going to be the passing down back. If the C-Rod stuff ever ends up, becoming a real issue, it doesn't seem like a real issue yet, but if it does, I mean, I really like Bashal Tutin. I'm not sure that Bashal Tutin is the immovable force. And again, there's value in just having the passing down back. We're talking about Alvin Kamara and having the passing down back on a good offense who then also has contingent value. So we drafted an Eric 0 running back team. Puka, Nico, Pickens, Evans, Loveland, Jalen Warren, Dak, Purdy. Of course, both those guys stacked. And then we started to get into our running back bag. Jonathan Brooks, Aaron Jones, Keaton Mitchell, Rashid Shaheed, Ryan Flanoy, Dejon Stribling, Tank Bigsby, Pat Freiermuth, Ray Davis, and LeQuint Allen. I also think LeQuint helpful on a team like this. Like I know it's not impressive, but like, dude, like you might like if LeQuint scores a couple of touchdowns in the first 5 weeks, I might need those to survive and stay in the mix to get in the 2-12 advance here. We're gonna take a super duper quick break, tell you guys a little bit about Spike Week Premium, and then we are gonna hop on over to the DraftKings Millie. I'm gonna pop in that draft right now before we head to this super duper quick break, and then I'll be right back and we'll do some DK drafting. Hey guys, if you are playing best ball this year, I promise you're going to want to check out Spike Week Premium. We're the very first company building an entire suite of best ball tools, everything you need to have to crush your best ball drafts. I like to call it your best ball co-pilot. We have the very first overlay tool, the very first portfolio tool, and a brand new draft optimizer. So the Draft Hacker overlays, our Draft IQ portfolio tool, you can look under every nook and cranny of your teams and your opponent's teams to find an edge in your drafts. You can optimize your drafts based upon the plan that you have with our draft optimizers, your target exposures, players you want to draft together or don't want to draft together, stacks you want to target. And of course, with the Draft Hacker overlays, you can customize every single thing you want to see on your screen while you're drafting. Playoff schedules, exposures, combinatorial ownerships, projected ownerships, stats about what these players did the previous year, all sorts of different stuff. And those are just the tools. We cover almost every sport that these best ball sites offer with rankings and strategy content. You can also get access to our premium Discord. Thousands of best ball sickos hanging out every day, 24/7, 365, talking strategy, player takes, having a little bit of fun. Our weekly lab call that we do on Wednesday evenings, where you can hang out and talk shop with me, the other Spike Week members, and the Spike Week personalities. Everything for just one low price, $39.99 a month or $200 for a year, gets you absolutely everything that we offer. Those tools, the rankings, content, Discord, for one low price. Come hang out with us this summer. I promise you won't regret it. Come join the Spike Week Sicko gang. And now, let's get back to the show. We are full in this DK Millie, and a lot of wonderful comments in the chat I got to catch up on here. Let's see. OTR, a man after my own heart, says he can't take Chase Brown over Bowers. I can't either. I like this. If you're drafting Darnell Washington, you're hoping for Donald Parham, like a secondary tight end who has his fantasy role is better maybe even than his real life role. What's difficult for Darnell Washington is his real application as an NFL football player is as a blocker. It's not that he's irrelevant as a passer, and the goal line stuff could be something we could dream about, but he's not like, it's not, this guy isn't going to all of a sudden become like some superstar pass catcher. He's his value to the team and why they paid him is for the blocking component. Let's see. Yeah, see, guessing. We're on the same page. I haven't played Madden in a decade, but I bet Darnell would be so sick for Madden. I haven't played Madden in years either. The game is not as fun as I remember it when I was younger. The last one I bought was a few years ago, and I just didn't enjoy it nearly as much as I used to. Maybe it's partly because but like I really still enjoy NBA 2K. I still really enjoy FIFA or whatever the hell they call it now. I still really enjoy MLB The Show. I played the Harry Potter, the Hogwarts video game, and actually really enjoyed that. I still enjoy video. I don't play anywhere near. I mean, I don't even know when the last time I played was, months ago. But every once in a while, I'll get into a little bit of a groove and start playing. The summer's just a little tough. Speaking of backfields and chaos, should I pick Chris Brooks or Lloyd? I prefer Chris Brooks personally. Yeah, McCarthy has historically. I do think with the Steelers personnel, with Darnell Washington and Pat Freiermuth, they make a lot of sense. And Michael Pittman and DK Metcalf, I think they make a ton of sense to play a lot of 12. So I think that's what makes Washington interesting at all. But that's also good for Pat Freiermuth and Michael Pittman. Who takes over if Chase Brown goes down? Or would they just grab someone off the street / trade? It depends. I mean, P. Ryan will continue to probably play as the passing down back, but it depends on Taj Brooks. It depends if Taj Brooks is good, then I think Taj and P. Ryan take the work. You know what I've really been wanting to do? This is my first Jonathan Taylor share. There is a guy. The Colts are a team. Another aren't you worried about the Colts? I'm absolutely freaking terrified of the Indianapolis Colts this year. And not in a way of aren't you worried you don't draft the Colts very much? In a way of, I struggle to see how this works. But as we've talked with DraftKings a lot, we don't get punished as much for not having the super duper elite wide receivers by the market, right? I'm still going to be able to build really good wide receiver rooms. I'm not necessarily going to build a robust room. I'll also build my Jonathan Taylor teams probably different than most people with Jonathan Taylor will build. And he's of course going to get the rock like freaking crazy. So if they can be competent, more competent than I think, that's great. If not, I'm almost using Jonathan Taylor as a freaking chaperone on DraftKings. Took my first share of Bateman yesterday and immediately hopped in the shower. That's funny. Are you still drafting some Gesicki, or has the Eric All stuff made you slow on him until we get more clarity on the situation? A little bit of both. It has made me slow on I liked Gesicki more when I didn't think Eric All was going to be ready. This guy he's torn his ACL 3 times in his life, I think. At least it's insane. The guy just tears his knee every other year. So I just sort of thought like it was over. Apparently, stupidly, thought it was just over for Eric All. And so I still think Gesicki is in play. But I think he's worse than I thought he was a week ago or like 4 days ago or whatever. My favorite thought about Ray Davis is there's definitely a non-zero chance Cook simply gets rested versus a putrid Dolphins side in Ray Spanks week 17. So he's a must draft for me. If you want the greatest mental health hack in playoff format best ball, where week 17 is all that matters, air quotes, draft Ray Davis, because I don't give two shits how nonsensical it is or whatever. I can finish the draft, turn the stream off, and go. I'm going to the gym after this and be happy because I'm like, God, it's going to be sweet when Ray Davis crushes the fucking Dolphins in week 17. I'm not saying it's logical. I'm just saying it's a wonderful, wonderful mental health hack. Wonderful. Oh. Well, Chase Brown. Okay, I'm not drafting another robust team. I promise. Get guys to teach a class in now 35 minutes. Better draft an extreme structure so that you can auto the last few. Yeah, there's a fair concern about, I mean, not everything is about week 17 matchups, right? Like the Panthers play, oh, Jesus. I don't have the full schedule. Let me pull up the cheat sheet. For those of you that need one, we do have a free cheat sheet with the playoff schedule. But like Carolina plays Cincy in week 15. What if like the Bengals are a good matchup? Pittsburgh is whatever. So let's say it is a bad match. You still need guys that get you there, and you need guys that are good, during the regular season. I agree with you. It's unlikely, unless a whole rash of injuries come through for the Seahawks defense, that is a good spot. But crazy stuff happens. You catch a pass and break 2 tackles and score a touchdown because you're really good. If you just get a bunch of volume, it can be a useful fantasy score. I don't worry about matchup strength too much from a week 17 perspective, but it is not nothing. Malik Washington / Dulcich plus Ray Davis is the elite week 17 pairing at cost. I do love me a little garbage. Can I add a name? So if we're really dreaming about this, right? Here's one that I'll also dream on. If James Cook is resting, if the Bills like have the playoff, maybe they have the division locked. I don't know. That seems unlikely, but they have the playoffs locked up, whatever. Let's not get guys hurt against the Dolphins. This is the scenario in which we're dreaming about, right? It's unlikely. Wouldn't Skylar Bell be nice last round wide receiver to add to that mix? Pretty fun prospect. A little bit more PPR-ish, but they've talked about how they think he can play both inside and outside. Seems like a nice little additional, like, wouldn't you like to have this like kind of fun young rookie, hopefully maybe peaking down the stretch of the season and gets more run against the Dolphins in week 17? Oh God, JT with Fannin and Watson bring back. No, please no. Please no. Hello, Sam. Good luck. CD Barkley. I like that start. right. Is this going to be a neighbors team? Devontae Smith. Ooh, man, the lad really has risen, huh? Oh my God. I don't have neighbors with either of those guys. That we got to correct that one, of course. Who is more likely to be drafted higher next season, Jefferson or Bowers? Jefferson. I still think Justin Jefferson is arguably the best wide receiver on planet Earth in his prime. And, you know, I don't want to, the who gets drafted higher next season also, right? Like, if JJ McCarthy is all of a sudden good, that will change things. If they add a different quarterback that's not Kyler Murray, that will change things. And of course, Fernando Mendoza is just a star that'll change things as well. But just based upon those two individual players, first of all, wide receivers go higher than like it's just incredibly like Justin Jefferson is off his worst season essentially, and he still goes in the top 10. You know what I mean? So the floor is just so high for elite wide receiver talents like Justin Jefferson that I still have to go JJ. As much as I love Brock Bowers. I don't hate this. I tend to trend towards building my JT teams with Daniel Jones because his round one value is fairly dependent on his competence. I don't hate that, though I do think Daniel Jones getting benched late season and Riley Leonard being competent or something is in the range of outcomes. Riley Leonard kind of cooked the Texans. Granted, they were resting a couple of defensive starters, but kind of cooked the Texans in was that week 18 last year? I think, yeah, week 18. It'll be Ty Johnson for all the marbles in week 17. I draft Ty Johnson too. Just spend your last couple picks on Ray Davis and Ty Johnson and Skylar Bell and Malik Washington. And again, this is not financial advice, but it is therapy advice. If you'd like to leave your draft and feel like, man, week 17 is going to be so much fun if this team gets there, just do the Bills-Dolphins stuff. Oh, man. Trenny says Skylar Bell is a target in the 18th for me already. He's getting a ton of buzz, and all signs point to him being a contributor early on. Feel like he's this year's Torrey Horton. I love that take. I'm on board with that take. 100%. We said we have to try to force ourselves to take more Denver Broncos stuff. Let's do Waddle. Let's do Jalen Waddle. So Jonathan Taylor, Chase Brown, Malik Neighbors, Jalen Waddle. Also don't have Jalen Waddle with these guys. Josh Palmer has been I need to go double check the practice reports and stuff from the Bills, but it's always so OTAs and mini camps and stuff. I don't want to draw too much from the like getting reps with the ones. Guys, so many guys sit out. They rotate guys in with the ones way more willingly at this time of the season, whether it be because, again, those guys are sitting out or just because, you try to rotate in some of the rookies and rotate in the depth guys. There's a huge amount of rotating going on at this stage of the offseason. They'll still do it in like full-fledged training camp and even during the preseason, but it gets a little bit more meaningful as the offseason goes on. It's not nothing. Again, nothing is ever nothing, but we have to like take these things with a grain of salt at this point in the offseason and make sure like there was, like George Holani reports, which I also think are not nothing at all. I think it's genuinely possible like George Holani gets the first snap for the Seahawks this year. And I don't think I probably wasn't factoring that in enough. And so sometimes it's a good reminder that you may not be, sort of pricing out these things as well as you could be. But also, like, again, with the Holani specifically, you also need to go and look and see who's practicing. And Emmanuel Wilson was not practicing. It's like, oh, George Holani's getting time with the ones. It's like, sure. But also, Emmanuel Wilson isn't at practice. So we don't have the full story. Oof. All my wide receivers got wiped out here, huh? How about oh, I tried to get Christian Watson, but we took Travion. That's fine. Jonathan Taylor, Chase Brown, Malik Neighbors, Jalen Waddle, Travion, of course, plays against Jalen Waddle in week 17. We'll take it. Yeah, see, this is a perfect example. I think right, Roman Wilson has been the darling of camp so far for what it's worth, and Rodgers even commented on the strides he's made. I agree, and these things do happen, and it's not nothing. Again, this is not Roman, but Roman Wilson simultaneously could have taken real steps, which is what happens with young players sometimes, right? Like I've said this a million times. Growth is not linear. Who knows? Sometimes guys like we kind of liked Roman Wilson as a prospect and thought maybe he'd come in and do some stuff, and obviously he did not come in and do anything. And it's been years, but sometimes like it takes a couple years for young guys to figure it out. Everybody grows at a different rate. But these are like that could simultaneously be true, and he still doesn't play, or doesn't play enough that we care. So that's the like balancing of like maybe Roman Wilson really has taken some serious strides. I don't think Rodgers is lying. He has no reason to lie about that, I guess, other than to hype Roman Wilson up. But he's never exactly done that with young guys in the past. Never cared. So like it's probably both true that Roman Wilson is better than he has been, but also it probably doesn't matter. Do you buy the lad as this year's JSN discourse? No. I think Lad is a good pick, and I think I really like Lad. He was bad last year and good as a rookie. I think Lad is just like, I know it's an easy thing to like go, who's this year's JSN that is like this early-ish round wide receiver pick, but is going, in the first round next year or something like that. I don't think Lad has that kind of season in his range of outcomes. I don't think the Chargers offense will ever construct themselves in a way that allows him to have that kind of season, but that doesn't mean Lad isn't an awesome pick. Dan Parker almost came back. Burrow, May. I don't want to take those guys, but let's do BTJ. Speaking of hype, BTJ getting all kinds of hype. Can Rodgers develop Roman Wilson like he did with Devontae Adams? I'm going to go ahead and say no. The real answer to every time is like, is someone who is this year's insert player name is always like, there isn't one. Because it's not, who is this year's, after Puka did the wide receiver thing, the rookie late round pick that is a superstar. Who is this year's Puka? There was none. Who was this year's, that same following season? Who's this year's Kyren Williams? There is not one. Who is this year's JSN? There is not one. You know what I mean? Who is this year's Saquon Barkley? Like if you said last year, it's like it was Jonathan Taylor, but there isn't real. You know what I mean? They're like, who's this year's Sam Howell, right? Like the Sam Howell season with Washington, which is really funny to look back on in hindsight, by the way. I drafted 50% Sam Howell, and it was a raging success. And that dude sucks. Like, it tells you a lot about the difference in a single season, especially best ball, like a single season, the results and who can be useful picks or even like borderline league winners, and the disconnect there is with NFL talent and like career longevity and all that kind of stuff. Like if you took Sam Howell over Drake May that season. They were both like late round quarterback picks. If you took Sam Howell over Drake May, you won that. And Drake May is, going to be an annual MVP candidate for years and went to the Super Bowl last year. Like, they could not possibly be more different from an NFL career and talent perspective. But for that season, none of that shit mattered. So that's the other like trick. Like, this game is so weird. Like, we could be totally right about these individual player talents. We turned it right, we grinded the tape and we figured it out, and it doesn't matter. Right? If someone came in and said, "No, dude, you cannot draft him, Hal. He's terrible." They were right with the second part and woefully wrong with the first part. Let's do the fan and bring back. Somebody mentioned it. Now it's top of mind. We'll do the fan and bring back, and then we'll get into this quarterback window here, and hopefully not get locked out of quarterback. This year's Tank Dell. There you go. Is it, dare I say, Tank Dell this year's Tank Dell? This year's Will Fuller. Which year? Once upon a time, Will Fuller was an absolutely incredible, like 80th overall pick in best ball when he was on the Deshaun Watson, DeAndre Hopkins, Will Fuller Texans. That was a printing press that year. But then there's the year that Will Fuller disappeared off the face of the earth, never to be heard from again. Will Fuller has been both sides of this coin. Right. Or you can be right or wrong. And I genuinely believe this about like Derrick Henry last year. It's like I basically faded Derrick Henry, and for 16 weeks, I guess week 1 he went nuts, right? And then in week 17 he went nuts. So for 15 weeks in the middle, I never once cared that I didn't draft Derrick Henry. But at the most important time, I cared a lot because you didn't need him. If you had Bijan, it was fine. But he buried you if you didn't have Derrick Henry in week 17. So it's like, were you wrong to fade him? Like, I guess maybe, because you clearly faded this guy that had that kind of nuclear ceiling. But if we use our, did he pay off his price from a season-long perspective? He did not. He did not pay off his price from a season-long perspective. Let's see. We're just gonna take Mahomes. I don't want to get into this quarterback battle with you guys. We'll see if Bo Nix comes back. That would be nice. Yeah, that's probably the easiest parallel, I would say. Brandon Ayuk is this year's Will Fuller, just never to be heard from again. I remember the 4-touchdown game. LED says, I had Will Fuller against a buddy in his 4-touchdown game. He literally shook my hand and conceded at halftime of the 1 p.m. games. That's one of my favorite. That's, if you want to give an example. Now, DFS and stuff has changed a lot more even since then. With Sims, and everybody's just so much smarter. The tools are smarter, the projections are better, etc. But the greatest shining example of how we were not playing the same game anymore from a DFS perspective is heading into that week. Will Fuller just scored 0 fantasy points the week before. 0 before his 4-touchdown game. And coming in like old school DFS, the talking point, every tout, we would all use it, is, well, he's probably going to be a little bit sneaky, or a little bit under-owned. I'm going to take Bo Nix here to go with my Jalen Waddle. And, of course, Travion Henderson on the other side. you're like, oh, he's probably going to be a sneaky because he goose egged for everyone last week. What's like the talking point we would use or everyone would use. And he was stone chalk. He was, everybody played Will Fuller. And so actually, if you faded him from a ownership perspective, you could talk yourself into that was smart. The game done changed. Didn't Henry pay off his price? Yeah, I mean, I'm by the end of the season. Let's see. Go to just running backs. Derrick Henry was the RB5 in ADP, the RB7 in total points, the RB7 in points per game. So like it was fine. But like points, same thing. I like to look at points per game added. Like how many points are you adding relative to your peer, right? There's no perfect metric, but it's a good metric to like how many points are you adding when you're playing relative to your position, your peers at the position. And so the top points per game added running backs last year were CMC, Jonathan Taylor. So like in terms of paying off your price, you could have gotten Jonathan Taylor at RB10 or Devon Achane at RB7 and they or James Cook at RB14 and they outperformed Derrick Henry. It's not that he was like bad, but it's that he wasn't a true like total difference maker either. And then even just like in terms of, we have nuclear weeks and spike weeks here in our best ball data. He didn't stand out from that perspective either. The usable weeks were fine, but so is the usable weeks for all the top guys. He had the 2 nuclear weeks, right? But Bijan had 7 of those. JT had 6 of those. CMC had 5 of those. Spike weeks, right? CMC 12, Cook 10, Bijan 10, and Derrick Henry's down here at 6, which is not bad. It's not bad, but it's just is that paying off your price? I don't really think so. Let's see. I need to do a little better job prepping. Points per game above the average starting running back score for a roster is how it's calculated. Look at that quarterback run. Thank God. Purdy at 114, stacked with Ricky. I'll trade you team. And you have Parker, Lawrence, Lemon with a robust start. I'll trade you. To end the thoughts. I'll trade you teams right now. Do I dare at the quarter? What's going on in this draft? Down comes J.K. Dobbins again to go to my Broncos. 2 quarterbacks, 4 running backs, 3 wide receivers, Neighbors, Waddle, BTJ. So we're not the strongest of wide receiver rooms here. So we're probably going to take a whole bunch of them. No, Worthy didn't come back. Kelsey didn't come back. Going to be a Tyquan Thornton ass team. Oh, of course, it's the teacher getting prepped for class, drafting a sick team. How many milli entries do you have so far? Let me show you. Go to DraftKings. 54. So this is number 55. Similar to whoever brought it up earlier. What I do like to do is just to like to stay on top of things across all the sites, as well as like never feel pressured to like have to do a billion drafts later. Like again, life hacking, I guess, is I try to do most days at least one in all of the flagship tournaments. I'm a little ahead of pace where I would normally be on all 3 of them: DraftKings, Millie, Best Ball Mania and the Drafters main event or whatever they call it. So I don't feel too much pressure to do one every single day, but I try to just, like I said, just to stay in a groove and stay like, oh man, this guy's going here now. Like, think if you sort of like take time off and come back, it's easy to lose sight of what's going on in the market. Yes, I'm just going to take Keaton as a bring back to my Mahomes eventual stack. Yes, I know it's ahead of ADP. Yeah, I think this is the thing I always try to remember myself, but also say it to anyone else who will listen as much as possible, is paying off your price is not just about your season-long production relative to your ADP. That, of course, matters. But like Derrick Henry, through how we would traditionally evaluate, air quotes, paying off your price, did not. He wasn't bad, but he did not pay off his price through the traditional lens, right? He was a little bit worse. You would have rather had Jonathan Taylor, James Cook, those guys in a similar range-ish. But week 17, the playoffs are all that matter, and week 17 is all that matters. Again, that's hyperbole, our saying, but it's also somewhat true that if you're the man you need in week 17, the price done been paid off, Credit card has zero balance now if you score 45 points in the week 17. Like, almost nothing else matters. Now, could you have gotten them there? Who knows? But it sort of doesn't matter. Almost every single player is, especially in the DraftKings Millie, that's a really big final. And even like last year, Derrick Henry was represented. Sam won with Derrick Henry. Right. And like Zay was good and Lamar was fine. But as Lance says, no Ravens really paid off their price last year. But they also weren't, I guess Bateman was bad. Like Andrews and Likely had some games. Zay was good. Not a major difference maker. He was really helpful. Okay, let's see what's going on at wide receiver and tight end. Speaking of, let's do Andrews. I'm a little overboard with Mark Andrews thus far, but I don't really have him on teams like this. So that's my take on like individual player exposure, is it matters so much less than we think. We'll be like, I don't want to be over 18% of that guy. I don't want to be over this. I fluctuate my target exposures a lot because it's more so dependent upon making sure, it's like, is this guy like, a high priority, a medium priority, a low priority? And like, if where they range on that, there's areas in between each of those. And it's like, Andrews is like a medium to slightly above average priority to me. So I know I'm going to be overweight. And I know the Ravens are a huge priority. So my exposure is going to be a little bit higher than, maybe most other people will have it. And probably even higher than just like my individual, again, comparing like macro, like I really like the Ravens. So I'm probably going to have more Mark Andrews than the Ravens are one of my team level priorities. So like I even draft Derrick Henry. Don't tell people. But then it's like, oh man, you said you only wanted 20%. Now you're going to be at 23 or whatever after today. It's like, yes, but I can always pull back on him later. But I may never get the opportunity to draft him with this other subset of players that I've drafted. So there's teams and combinations of players I also want to make sure I have together. And that's why I'm a huge proponent of using the tools to help me. We have the draft optimizer, right, to guide my ownership exposures, like individual players, as well as some combinatorial stuff and rules and all that different kind of stuff. But then also the draft hacker to be like, oh, look, you said you wanted expert percentage of this player, but you haven't taken, and you're over that number, but you haven't taken him with Jonathan Taylor or with Chase Brown or whatever. What a weird comment. Let's do. Sure, McMillan. That's fine. This is one of the funnier comments I think I've ever gotten on a YouTube stream. It only took 6 years. Only took 6 years for someone to tell me, can we stop talking about sports on a fantasy football draft stream in June and talk about Xbox? Mo, if you come back tomorrow, we're going to do some fun stuff with the draft optimizer tomorrow. So I know that is not answering your question, but yes, I will, but it's going to be a little bit more my focus tomorrow. Please stop talking about, Can you please stop talking about football on this fantasy football stream? Will you talk about Xbox? First of all, I'm a PS5 guy. Get the fuck out of here with your Xbox stuff. And second, all the numbers are making my head hurt. Think of your audience. Like, I don't know who you think my audience is. It's June 10th, and I'm drafting my 54th DraftKings Millie team. I just drafted like my 55th best ball name in June. Who the fuck do you think my audience is? I know I was talking about Madden for a couple seconds, and I make some Madden analogies and everything, but like, that's not what we do here. It's really, Eric, it's pretty unhealthy to talk about fantasy sports this much. That is true. Ask my wife, can we talk Final Fantasy instead? Oh, shoot, man. When does the new Call of Duty come out? Are they still making Call of Duties? I used to play a lot of Call of Duty back in college and after college, but oh, man. That's really funny. I needed that. That was great. It's better than the people that come in that are, just want to talk shit or whatever. Of course, he comes preloaded in the 150s. Ryan Flanoy. Yeah, we're going to have to schedule a day to one day cleanse to just yap about. Trust me, I can yap. You guys know that about me. We stream for 2 hours a day, 4 days out of the week. We record multi-hour podcasts with Karain every single week. I do DFS shows every single week. Like, trust me, I'm a yapper. It is kind of funny. Like, my career, this was not my intent to like be streaming drafts. I never really actually intended to get into content creation. It sort of became a necessary evil, and now I do enjoy it. Now it's fun to be able to talk to people like you guys every single day about a fun subject. But actually, I'm like generally more quiet outside of this. I'm obviously not a brief person, and I ramble and yap and stuff every day for a career, but I tend to be a little more reserved, actually, which I think people would find surprising. I did not do any best ball World Cup. If anybody has some betting tips, I need some stuff to sweat because I didn't do the best ball games. I wish I would have. I just didn't really have the. If I'm gonna do something, I want to commit to it, and like I don't want to just like take somebody else's. Like I could have just like there's the soccer channel in the Spike Week Discord has been blowing up for months now, and I read it, And I could have just like taken what these guys are saying, or paid for somebody's rankings or read some articles or whatever. But like if I'm going to invest my time and money into it, I like to like learn it, and there just wasn't enough time. It's like I don't know the players, or like I don't know. I'm gonna watch like every game, and I really enjoyed the World Cup, and I'll bet on it and stuff for fun. Excuse me, but um, it requires a fairly significant investment of time and effort that I just really didn't really have. Sure, Malik Washington, 256 2 through 15 rounds. Jonathan Taylor, Chase Brown, quite a different start for me. Added, of course, Malik Neighbors, Jalen Waddle to do our to go all the way back to the beginning to do some Broncos stuff. Travion Henderson, Brian Thomas Jr., Harold Fannin, a good shout from the chat. A little, nothing quite like a Colts Browns game correlation to win $3 million. Patrick Mahomes, Bo Nix, J.K. Dobbins, Keaton Mitchell, Mark Andrews, Jalen McMillan, Ryan Flanoy, and Malik Washington. There we go. We got some soccer sharps in here. Where are you at on Brandon Ayuk? I'm not touching him right now. I'm not drafting him right now. I don't feel the need. I don't see I mean, he could get cut later today for all that I know. I think that would be wildly unlikely. I don't see a solution coming to this. I don't see light at the end of the tunnel. I mean, I guess I see light at the end of the tunnel, but it's close to the season. I just don't see this thing being resolved anytime soon. He's clearly upset. The Niners are upset, and it's not going well. And I don't think he's doing himself any favors. I feel for him. He's made mistakes, significant ones. But he got his life-changing contract and then got it ripped away from him, and now he's having his name dragged through the mud because the 49ers are feeling emotional. Like this multi-billion dollar organization owned by billionaires is like dragging this kid through the mud. He's 28, this adult, whatever, through the mud because they don't want to pay him. And so, I feel the Niners can do what they are doing, whatever they choose to do. He's under contract. They want to trade him, but no one's going to, given everything that's going on right now, no one's going to trade for him. So he's upset, and I get it. Let's see. Who took Ray? I knew it. You sons of bitches. Well, how about a Ted Hurst share? I need to get a little bit more Ted Hurst. I obviously have Jalen McMillan, sort of buying a Bucks wide receiver. It's a little hard to envision McMillan and Ted Hurst both getting there, but it could be a pass the baton type situation from McMillan to Hurst, and that'll do big on this team. Enjoy class. Nothing quite like teaching, ripping some fantasy drafts right before going and molding the minds of our youth. You really do love to see it. I have played a sprinkling of soccer DFS, so I'm familiar a little bit with how it works. I don't know that I'll be playing tomorrow. Yeah, I mean, so we can get into it. Grant says he's making $27 million this season, not showing up to work. The actual nerve of this guy. I mean, I understand what you're saying, but I think we actually talked about it again in the Discord a little bit this morning. I just think we should have a little more empathy in situations like this. Let's see. Let me make a pick, and then we can blabber about it. How about Surratt on this team? I referenced, no situations are always completely apples to apples, but like many athletes have discussed um, the struggles that come when you are completely cast aside from your team. When you suffer these major injuries, and again, I'm not defending everything that Brandon Ayuk has done by any stretch of the imagination at all. He's made mistakes, but we all make mistakes. We all say and do things that we regret. We're emotional in the moment, or we're immature, or whatever. But we don't know the whole full story of everything in any of these situations. We don't know Brandon Ayuk's background. We don't know the struggles that he's dealing with mentally. Like, Kevin Love has talked about this, and we just had the Rondale Moore situation. Like, I feel like we don't learn well enough from those types of situations that we don't have the full picture, and guys struggle with things. And during the Rondale situation, I thought it was really insightful that, like, he was amazing in college and comes into the NFL and isn't quite succeeding. So Brandon Ayuk was good in college and then had some success in the NFL, and then the injuries hit and the down performance hit, whether it be because of the injuries or whatever. And sometimes these guys, so you end up like you're like almost not a part of the team. You won't travel with the team, you don't practice, you don't hang out with those guys as much. You're in the training room, or you have separate appointments and all this different kind of stuff, and that can cause issues for these guys from a mental health perspective. And we don't know the support system that they have around them, right? So I just try to take a step back and remind myself that, like, everybody's human, and I think he's probably making some mistakes, assuredly, that he'll look back on later in life and regret. But I just want to have the word I was generally using today is that I just think we should have some more empathy in these types of situations. Because if everyone judged me, I do. Let's do the Jordan James one. If everyone judged me for all of my worst moments and my biggest mistakes, I can only imagine what people would think of me. And if I judged everyone for and held the mistakes and their worst moments against them and did not ever consider, what could possibly be going on in all of their lives. Yeah, just I think we should have a little more kindness and a little more empathy, because we wouldn't want to be judged for our worst moments. Anyway, there's some non-numbers and football talk for the person who wanted it. Sorry, it wasn't Xbox, but there's some non-football talk. You should just be a little more kind and be a little more empathetic. I think it would go a long way. I mean, this isn't what I'm saying, but I feel like we've said enough. And see, I think this is part of the problem. Are we still talking about Ayuk or Antonio Brown? You know what I mean? Like, we don't know these people. We doom scroll on social media, and then we judge them by their worst moments and lump them all in together. Yeah, Darren Waller. Like, now, no one really talks about Darren Waller like he's this bad person, because he tried to turn his life around. He did a lot of dumb stuff. Mike McDaniel. We don't speak about Mike McDaniel in a truly a negative light, and he's discussed alcoholism and a lot of bad things that he's done. I was watching the St. Louis Battlehawks lose yet again in the UFL conference championship or whatever it was. There's no football on, so yes, I was watching some of that nonsense this weekend, I think it was, and I saw Ted Ginn Jr. Got a DUI or DWI, whatever they call it where he is, and same thing, like, truly a horrible mistake. Do I condone that? Of course not. Let's see here. I think 268, 2610 2. Yeah, we'll do 2610 2. Let's do. I always do Pat Bryant, so let's do Troy Franklin instead on this team for once. I think that would be wise. For sure. I got no problem. I ain't mad. I ain't just like I'm not judged just because if we disagree, if you guys have a different opinion, there's nothing wrong with that. But we can disagree and move on and still be friends and still respect one another, right? It is what it is. Let's see. This team makes me feel real uncomfortable. We got one more wide receiver pick to make. Let's look at the roster. So Mahomes and Bo Nix. Good thing I remembered this and went through this. Mahomes and Bo Nix at quarterback. We have a fun little Broncos stack that you see over here. One of my favorite things of the Draft Hacker is showing you your week 7. You can see the teams, but you can see the playoff matchups as well over here. So we got this beautiful Broncos Patriots. I'm sure that'll shoot out, right? No bad weather, no good defense or anything being played in that game. Little Chase Brown, Elijah Surratt, Mark Andrews, little JT Fannin, a little Neighbors Flanoy, and right now Mahomes plus Keaton. And then from a team stacking perspective, obviously you see a lot of those similar ones, but also the Jalen McMillan, Ted Hurst. I keep freaking forgetting. Oh man, who took Taekwon? Somebody took Taekwon. Who took Taekwon? How am I getting mad that someone took Taekwon? Who is this? Nate. Come on, Nate. Maybe we should talk about video games if we're sweating or getting upset about not getting Taekwon freaking Thornton. But you know what that does? That allows me to buy the dip. A little bit of, if we're talking camp hype and backstacking, last year I would have taken Jalen Royals every single time on this team. Amen, Grant. I'm with you. We'll take a Jalen Royals share here. Jalen Royals 2 touchdowns week 17. That's going to fill in for our Ray Davis. No Cyrus Allen. I'm not a big Cyrus Allen guy. I'll adjust later. I would rather bet on. I think Jalen Royals is the better prospect. I've come around a little bit more on stick when you sort of like that guy. They get a little bit of hype, even though they didn't do anything as a rookie, or even sometimes as a second-year player. We've seen so many scenarios where these guys start to break out later, but we always write them off after the rookie year. Almost always write them off after the rookie year. So, all right, real quick. JT, Chase Brown, Malik Neighbors, Jalen Waddle, Travion Henderson, Brian Thomas Jr., Harold Fannin, Patrick Mahomes, Bo Nix, J.K. Dobbins, Keaton Mitchell, Mark Andrews, Jalen McMillan, Ryan Flanoy, Malik Washington, Ted Hurst, Elijah Surratt, Jordan James, plus Troy Franklin and Jalen Royals to cap off a 2-6-10 team with some Chiefs and some Broncos. Royals is this year's Fuller. That is wonderful. No, there is nothing wrong with taking Bucky Irvin and Kenny Gainwell on the same team. All right, that is going to do it for today's show. Thank you guys for hanging out. If you guys can hit thumbs up on your way out, it's really super appreciated. And we're back to the regular schedule. If you're in the Spike Week Discord, if you're a premium member, join us in the lab. It's Wednesday. That means at 6 p.m. Eastern, we're hanging out, talking shop, talking about maybe some of the stuff we talked about here today and a whole lot more with all the sickos in the Spike Week Discord. And of course, we'll be back tomorrow at 11 a.m. Eastern and Friday at 11 a.m. Eastern for some more best ball drafts. Have a wonderful Wednesday. Stay cool out there. Stay cool out there, and I'll see you guys tomorrow. Peace.
Woo! Those were some spicy takes. Want to stay up to date with all of the other spicy takes we're going to have over here at Spike Week? Why don't you press that subscribe button below? You turn notifications on, we draft a team, boom, you know about it. We have another spicy take, boom, you know about it. You can be there, you can draft with us. You want to stay up to date? That's how you do it. All right, we'll catch you later next time here at Spike Week.